talked about Marc Guehi and Newcastle, the rumors there. It seems like Crystal Palace is asking for £75 million. Paul, do you think Newcastle are really going to go that high to make it happen? Obviously, he had an incredible Euros, but that's quite a price tag.
Listen, they're the richest club in the world, aren't they? And so long as it stacks up with FFP and PSR, why not? It's a player that the manager wants. You look at the likes of Jared Branthwaite at Everton. There's huge fees been hung around his neck for his potential transfer away from Everton. And then you look at where the two players are in their career. Gay's got far more experience. He's played in the England squad. He's played in the Euros. You look at the quality that he's got. He's arguably a better player and more of a finished article than Branthwaite. With Branthwaite, you're paying for, yes, a quality player, but you're also paying for potential and a player that may reach the heights that Gay has already done at such a young age. So when you're looking at the fees banded around for others, I don't think that's out of the question. I mean, you look at what Liverpool paid for Van Dijk years ago, and people said, oh, that was far too much, that was overpaid. But look at what they've got back for that. You get the right player and the right fit, you pay the right price for it if you feel it's the right player. And I think that's where Newcastle are at with it. Crystal Palace are not going to be held over a barrel over the fee. They're going to get what they want and what they think that the player's worth. Listen, if it wasn't Newcastle, they wouldn't be in the 60s or 70s. But a player's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for them. When you're dealing with a club of the riches of Newcastle, Manchester City and others, then you can obviously put the transfer fee up. Newcastle have gone this far down the road. I can't see them walking away now.
For sure. And Pete, there's been rumors of Joachim Andersen leaving Crystal Palace. Do Newcastle need to try and get this deal over the line before a potential exit for him, or those two deals are completely separate?
Yeah, Palace won't want to lose both of their centre-backs so late in the window. As you said, I think it was quite interesting what Steve Parish, the Crystal Palace chairman, said earlier this week. He said it would take superstar money to sign a superstar player like Guehi. So, yeah, like Paul says, Palace are going to get top dollar for a player like Guehi. They are using the scale of probably what Chelsea paid for Wesley Fofana from Leicester. Also, £75 million he was. What Harry Maguire cost when he went to Manchester United, it was around £80 million. So I think Palace are well within their rights to ask for top money, and it's now up to Newcastle whether to do it. Regards Joachim Andersen and Fulham, I'd be very surprised if Crystal Palace would consider letting him go to a sort of a rival who's probably in competition with maybe Palace for a top 10 finish in the Premier League next season as well. And I'm sure the player himself, I'm not sure he'd be overly keen on making that move to Fulham. It's probably a bit of a sideways step rather than an upward step if one of the big boys was to come in for Joachim Andersen, who is, for me, a very underrated defender. I think he's a top Premier League performer now. He's always done well for Denmark on the international stage as well. So I think Fulham making that bid of 20 million was nowhere near what Palace value him at. You'd probably take at least double that fee to have any chance of signing him. But I'm sure Crystal Palace right now, as things stands, are planning for this new season with Marc Guehi and Joachim Andersen in their side, and with those two players in their defence, they're definitely a better team.
There's no doubt about that. Newcastle obviously have been looking for a right winger throughout this entire window. It looks like Miguel Almiron is on the way out, or at least potentially they are receiving bids for him. MLS teams have been involved. Noni Madueke is one who's been kind of thrown around since the arrival of Pedro Neto at Chelsea and their almost 50-player squad. Paul, could you see Noni Madueke fitting in well with Eddie Howe's side?
42 officially registered players at Chelsea at the moment and counting. That's their official first team squad if you look at their first team roster.
How big is that dressing room?
42 and counting. You know, the thing is, I'd love to go to Enzo Maresca and just see if he could name every one of them. Put all the players in the line and see if he can walk up down the line and name every one. Might be a case of I'll have to come back to that one. But yeah, it's an incredible squad. So there's always going to be links with Chelsea players away from the bridge. We've seen the farce that's turned into the Conor Gallagher transfer. They do have to thin that squad. It's no secret that some of their players will be available. I mean, Madueke's still only 22 years old. They've paid $28.5 million from PSV for him. A player that hasn't quite reached his potential at Chelsea. Could he flourish under a manager like Eddie Howe? He certainly fits the bill, the age, the profile of the player. I'm not so sure we've seen enough of him in this country for me to sit here and go, yeah, absolutely, it'd be a great signing for Newcastle. But when you're paying, I think Chelsea would probably accept around what they paid for him. No, honestly, Pete might be more versed on that than me. But paying $28.5 million, I think Chelsea might just cut the losses and accept something around that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you see that to be the right price for that deal? And is that one that's within Newcastle's budget, if assuming they bring in Guehi as well?
Yeah, I think obviously Newcastle, as Paul says, money is no issue to them. It's just the PSR that they're battling with right now as well. If they could sign somebody like Madueke for £30 million, I think it could be a good deal. I think ideally if they are to sign Madueke or somebody else, they might look at a loan option, knowing that Chelsea are desperate to get players off the books just to trim the squad a bit as well, and then maybe with an option or an obligation in there. But obviously their top target in the summer for that right-sided winger was Michael Olise, but they just couldn't compete with Bayern Munich. He was always going to move to Germany once they made their move as well. But yeah, I'm sure Eddie Howe will be hoping, even if they do go ahead and sign Marc Guehi for big money, that money will be available for that right-sided winger, because they have been two of the key positions that he's been asking the club to bring in if he wants Newcastle back up there challenging for a top 4 place.
For sure, Pete, you talk about that forward spot that Eddie Howe's been looking for, and Ferran Torres is another one who's been linked for that role. He's actually a little bit more versatile. Obviously, we know he can play through the middle as well. There have been reports of a Newcastle bid that was already rejected. Barcelona looking for £30 million. Do you see Ferran Torres as a player who could come back to the Premier League?
I think that's a problem. I don't think Ferran Torres is overly fussed about coming back to the Premier League. He is happy at Barcelona. He might not be first choice in Hansi Flick's side in this upcoming season, but it does seem he is happy to fight for his place. He's on a very lucrative contract as well at the Nou Camp, so I think right now it's probably Barcelona pushing this one, trying to move players out of the squad to help with their precarious financial position, and I'm sure they'd be willing to listen to offers for Ferran Torres, but as it stands right now, I think the player is quite happy to stay and fight for his place, and it would have to take a really attractive offer to convince him to make that move back to the Premier League after he had that short spell at Manchester City a few seasons back.